Two women, one brutal night, a killer who showed absolutely no remorse. On October 7, 2019, Christine Melton invited a man she'd just met at a bar back to her Cape Coral home. She thought she was being kind. She went to sleep believing she was safe. She wasn't. While she slept, Wade Stephen Wilson strangled her to death, stole her car, and left her lifeless body behind. But Wade Stephen Wilson wasn't done. Hours later, he was hunting again. He spotted Diane Ruiz and approached her with a lie asking for directions. When she stopped to help, he forced her into Christine's stolen car and strangled her. But Diane fought back. She wouldn't die. So Wilson drove to a remote area, pushed her out onto the pavement, and ran her over. Then he backed up, ran her over again, and again, and again. He crushed her body until she was unrecognizable. 2 families destroyed, 2 lives stolen in a single day. And the only reason Wilson was caught? His own father turned him in after Wade confessed what he'd done. On August 27, 2024, Judge Nicholas Thompson stood in that Florida courtroom with one decision to make: life in prison or death. The courtroom fell silent. The families held their breath. And Wilson? He stood there, emotionless, as his fate was sealed. This is one of those moments you have to see to believe. Before we go inside that courtroom, hit that like button if you believe in accountability for the worst among us, and subscribe, because what you're about to witness is raw, unfiltered justice in action. For 5 years, these families waited for this moment. Now, it's finally here. This is the sentencing of Wade Stephen Wilson.
All right, let the record reflect that State's President, Defense Counsel, and the defendant are all present. We're here for sentencing. Was there anything else that the court needed to address prior to sentencing?
No. No, God.
All right. So I have considered all of the testimony and evidence, arguments of counsel, applicable case law, and statutes. I have prepared a written sentencing order, which I will file contemporaneously with the pronouncement of the sentence here today. I also have copies for the state and defense, which I'll hand out once I conclude. So in the state of Florida versus Wade Stephen Wilson, case number 19 CF 568, the court will read aloud the portion of the sentencing order related to the sentencing circumstances and proportionality. In evaluating the aggravating and mitigating factors, the court does not engage in a mere counting procedure, but instead makes a reasoned judgment based on the totality of the circumstances. In reaching this decision, the court is mindful that because death is a unique punishment in its finality, its application is reserved only for those cases where the most aggravating and least mitigating circumstances exist. The law never requires the imposition of a death sentence. In this case, the totality of the circumstances indicates the defendant, with premeditation, beat and strangled Christine Melton in her home before stealing her vehicle and driving to meet his girlfriend, Melissa Montanez. After Montanez refused to get into the car with him, the defendant battered her in broad daylight. The defendant told law enforcement, when Ms. Montanez managed to flee from the defendant, he fled the scene and drove back to Cape Coral, where he decided that he would murder another person. He saw Diane Ruiz walking to work and pulled over, pretending to ask for directions. She got into the car to provide directions, but the defendant strangled her when she tried to exit. He then drove to an empty lot, strangling her into unconsciousness at least one additional time on the way there. When she tried to flee from the car, he drove over her at least one time, inflicting mortal injuries to her spine, ribs, and neck. The evidence showed that both murders were heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and that the second murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated. The defendant inflicted serious physical and emotional pain to the victims. Moreover, the defendant committed the murders while on probation for prior felony convictions, and he committed 2 first-degree murders contemporaneously with each other and with grand theft of a motor vehicle, battery, and burglary of a dwelling. There were no statutory mitigating circumstances that were established, but the court considered the non-statutory mitigating circumstances presented by the defendant. Out of 13 enumerated non-statutory mitigating factors, the court found that 10 had been established. Out of those established, 6 were given little weight. The totality of the mitigating circumstances indicates that the defendant suffers from drug use from a young age, along with undiagnosed and untreated mental health issues of some kind. He felt abandoned by his biological parents, but had a devoted adoptive family who raised him in a supportive and loving environment. Defendant did not resist law enforcement when arrested and confessed fully to both murders. The court has further considered giving great weight to the advisory verdict of the jury, who recommended that the death penalty be imposed by a vote of 9-3 on count 1 for the murder of Christine Melton and a vote of 10-2 on count 4 for the murder of Diane Ruiz. The court recognizes that there is no mathematical formula for considering the aggravating and mitigating factors. It is not enough to weigh the number of aggravators against the number of mitigators. The court carefully considered the nature and quality of each aggravator and mitigator. Having reviewed all of the aggravating factors proven beyond a reasonable doubt and all of the mitigating circumstances reasonably established by the evidence, the court finds that the aggravating factors greatly outweigh mitigating circumstances. Given the facts of the case, nothing in defendant's background or mental state would suggest that a death sentence is inappropriate. This court's review of other reported capital cases has led the court to conclude that the death penalty is not disproportionate in this case. Under the totality of the circumstances and evidence, the court finds no basis to override the jury's verdict. The totality of the circumstances warrants that the defendant, Wade Stephen Wilson, be sentenced to death for each count of first-degree murder. Accordingly, it is ordered and adjudged that the defendant, Wade Stephen Wilson, be sentenced as follows. Count 1, first-degree murder of Christine Melton. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death. Count 2, grand theft of a motor vehicle. The defendant is sentenced to 5 years imprisonment in the Florida Department of Corrections. Count 3, battery. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 364 days in the Lee County Jail. Count 4, first-degree murder of Diane Ruiz. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death. Count 5, the burglary of a dwelling. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 15 years imprisonment in the Florida Department of Corrections. Count 6, petty theft. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 364 days in the Lee County Jail. The defendant is given credit for all time served on this case on all counts. All counts are to run concurrent with each other, meaning at the same time. All statutorily mandated fines, fees, and costs as announced on the record are imposed, and the defendant is committed to the custody of the Department of Corrections for execution of this sentence as provided by law. The defendant is hereby notified that these convictions and sentences are subject to automatic review by the Florida Supreme Court. If he cannot afford an attorney to represent him in any appeal, the court will appoint one for him. Are there any other matters to present to the court?
Briefly, Judge, the state would be seeking $17,500 cost of prosecution.
I'm sorry, how much?
$17,500, Judge.
All right. Any objection?
No, sir.
All right. That will be imposed then. Any other terms or conditions?
Absolutely, Judge. We just want to make sure that Mr. Wilson has absolutely no contact with the victim's family in this particular matter.
There'll be no contact ordered with any of the victim's family members and anything else.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right.
Judge, I understand he has other cases pending here and elsewhere. Mr. Wilson asked me to ask the court, within whatever authority you have, to get him to death row as soon as possible.
Okay. Well, in relation to those other cases, I know we have cases pending here in the circuit. Today is not the day to handle those. I would maybe put those, I could do it as early as September 16th. I believe that's Monday morning.
That's Malcolm's case, Judge.
Yes, Your Honor. Malcolm Dowling from Mr. Wade Wilson. September 16th would be fine, but...
Okay. Well, I think it'd be more appropriate to handle that at a different time. So let's do that September 16th then at 9 a.m. for the other cases, which are case numbers
20 CF 16591 and 23 CF 15499.
Okay. And we have court on 16th, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Judge, if I may, he also has a VOP warrant out of Broward County, Palm Beach County. I'm going to get in touch with the authorities over there, but if need be, we'll ask the court to ROR him on that VOP warrant so he can be taken up to.
Well, it's not a motion in front of me today, but if you certainly are able to file whatever you want to file, and
Yes, sir.
I'll consider it.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Not from the state judge.
All right, sir. Then, Mr. Wilson, you will be fingerprinted and remanded to the sheriff's department. It'll be held without bond and for transport to the Department of Corrections when it's appropriate. If nothing else, then we're adjourned. And I'll give you your copies. Original. Mr. Shirley or Mr. Hollander? Well, one for the state, one for the defense. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The court has spoken. Wade Stephen Wilson will face the death penalty for the murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. But here's the hard truth. No verdict, no sentence, no amount of legal justice can bring these women back. For Christine's family, for Diane's loved ones, this moment may offer closure, but it doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't fill the void left at every holiday dinner, every birthday, every moment when they reach for the phone to call someone who will never answer again. The weight of their loss doesn't disappear because a judge handed down a sentence. It stays with them forever. Christine Melton was 35 years old. She had a life ahead of her. She had people who loved her. Now, her family lives with the permanent absence of her laughter, her presence, her future. Diane Ruiz was a mother of two. Her children will grow up without her. They'll graduate, get married, have children of their own, and she won't be there to see any of it. Her family doesn't just mourn who she was. They mourn everything she'll never get to become. A death sentence might feel like justice on paper, but it doesn't repair what was broken. It doesn't undo the violence. It doesn't give these families back the people they lost. All it does is confirm that the man who destroyed their lives will pay the ultimate price. For some, that's enough. For others, it's just another layer of grief. Cape Coral, Florida, is a community that was shaken to its core by these murders. When someone like Wade Wilson walks among us, charming enough to get invited into homes, calculated enough to lure victims with a simple request for help, it shatters our sense of safety. Christine and Diane weren't targeted because of who they were. They were targeted because they were kind, because they trusted, because they believed in basic human decency. And that's what makes this so terrifying. Wilson didn't just take two lives, he reminded an entire community how vulnerable we all are to the darkness that hides behind a normal face. Today's verdict doesn't restore that sense of security. It just confirms that the threat has been removed. Now, let's address the bigger question. Was the death penalty the right call? Florida juries recommended death, 9 jurors for Christine's murder, 10 for Diane's. Judge Thompson agreed. But this case raises uncomfortable questions. Wilson's defense pointed to his troubled childhood, his substance abuse, his mental health struggles. Does any of that excuse what he did? Absolutely not. But does it complicate the conversation about punishment versus rehabilitation? For some people, yes. There are those who believe the death penalty is the only appropriate response to crimes this brutal. And there are others who argue that executing someone, even a killer, makes us no better than the violence we condemn. There's no easy answer here. Justice isn't always black and white. What we do know is this: 2 women are dead because Wade Wilson chose violence. He chose to take lives. He showed no remorse when he confessed to his father. He showed no remorse in court, and now he'll face the consequences of those choices. Whether you believe that consequence should be death or life in prison, that's something each of us has to wrestle with. Now that you've seen the verdict, what are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the death penalty was the right choice, or should there have been another way? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your reactions. Wade Stephen Wilson's case is more than just a legal decision. It's a reminder of how crime, punishment, and justice intersect. No matter the outcome, the impact on the victims' families and the community will last a lifetime. But can justice really be served in cases like this? Or does the law fall short of addressing the full scope of the damage caused by such violence? What do you think about the death penalty in this case? Was this the right punishment for Wade Stephen Wilson, or do you think the system missed something? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more true crime cases and thought-provoking stories. Thank you for watching, and let's continue the conversation together.